Yeah, Ann Lister, welcome home, cheater. This episode was an emotional roller coaster. It was. We all knew it was coming. No pun intended. All I have to say about this episode is I was put through it emotionally. And I just can't be mad about seeing Saran Jones kiss any woman. But I was slightly mad this episode. At first I was really into this affair and now I regret it. That is what the ladies say about me. Okay. Hi guys, welcome to a video, and in today's video I'm just going to be reviewing episode 4 of season 2 of Gentleman Jack. Halfway there. We are halfway through this season and I have to tell you, I think I need therapy. I mean, what's new? The emotional roller coaster that I've been on this season is something else. Yeah, this episode was very emotionally rich and I definitely enjoyed it from beginning to end, but I was also kind of filled with regret, you know? Because she shouldn't have done it. She shouldn't have cheated on Anne. She shouldn't have done it, but she did. And I'm not saying I didn't appreciate some aspects of it. I'm just saying there was a lot of guilt afterwards and... But let's get into it. So the beginning of the episode has quite a comedic twist, which I wasn't expecting. I was expecting the high drama to continue, but as is signature to Gentleman Jack, they do combine drama and comedy quite well. Even still, Anne and Mariana are definitely having it out in this scene, and it's quite heated between them. You can see how much Mariana is trying to plant the seeds of doubt in Anne's mind about Anne Walker, suggesting their relationship is purely financial, and you can see that she's getting to Anne, especially when she says that she's fooling herself. Yeah, the bit where Anne says nobody will ever know of her connection with Mariana, at least not from her, and then looks at the audience, it just had me in stitches. And I love that even though this episode was quite high drama and high intensity, they still found a way to thread more comedic moments into it. And as I say, in this episode, you can see that Mariana is just determined to put these seeds of doubt into Anne's mind about her relationship with Anne Walker, and she also brings up Anne Walker's mental health and can she be discreet about their relationship, and you can see how she's slowly but surely wearing Anne down. I love the shots of Anne and Anne writing letters to one another. I just can't get over how romantic this show is, because there's so many period dramas out there, but to have one like this that focuses on a lesbian relationship the way that it does is just, it's so unique and special, and it's so romantic. It's like Downton Abbey for lesbians, and I love Downton Abbey and I love lesbians, so Yahtzee. When Mariana knocks on Anne's door, I was on the edge of my seat. I believe that I once again gasped in this episode. Mariana is just a mess. She is a wreck and she's so manipulative towards Anne. And you can see that Anne is trying to do the right thing, but there's a part of her which still connects to Mariana, so it's but it made for fantastic viewing because I was on the edge of my seat the whole time and I was so absorbed in all of this. Just throw me in the lesbian sea. Just do it. One thing I was very impressed with this episode was the costume and the mise-en-scene. It was just beautiful, especially when Anne and Mariana went for their walk. And what's interesting about this scene is we get a real insight into the history of Anne and Mariana's relationship. And this is necessary because it's clear from this scene in particular that Anne and Mariana had a lot that they needed to say to one another. And from this conversation, we gain a lot more insight into why their relationship was so complicated. And it's certainly easier to empathize with Mariana after hearing about the difficult position she was in regarding her marriage to Charles. At the same time, you can absolutely understand where Anne is coming from, why she was so heartbroken by Mariana, and why that chapter chapter is finished for her. It's been fairly obvious this season that they're setting the character of James Ingham up to be a suitor to Anne Walker. I don't think we've seen the last of him at all. He does hint at a marriage proposal to Anne, and this is brought about by Anne Walker's family thinking that they know what's best for Anne and she doesn't know what's best for herself. And while she makes things clear to him this episode, as I say, I don't think we've seen the last of him. It's very interesting to see the social expectation of women to settle into a heteronormative marriage in the 19th century, whether that's what they desire or not. And it's interesting to see how that ties into not just social expectation, but financial security as well. And we see that this episode both through Mariana and Anne Walker, and it shows how privileged Anne Lister was in that time to live independently. So back to Anne and Mariana, you can see that Mariana is just still very much got her eye on the prize, and Anne finally caves after Mariana tells Anne that Charles has been sexually harassing a young woman and about the true state of their marriage. I can't sit here and say I hated every minute of it, quite the opposite in fact. Both Saran and Lydia brought the heat to that scene, so it's very difficult for me as a lesbian to be opposed to it completely. But you can see that Anne regrets it as soon as it happens, and she does spend most of this episode rebuffing Mariana's advances and considering their history with one another and considering how much Mariana has worn her down. It's not really surprising that this happens, but you do feel so bad for Anne Walker. Just after everything her and Anne have been through, no. The thing about Gentleman Jack is we're dealing with a real life historical figure, and Anne Lister was not a perfect person. She was human, and she definitely had negative aspects to her personality, as does everyone. And I don't think Gentleman Jack sugarcoats this. What made this episode so interesting is the stark difference between the way Anne and Mariana and the way Anne and Anne connect to each other in the bedroom. You know, with Mariana, it's rushed and passionate, whereas with Anne Walker, it's calm and it's connective. And that highlights a huge difference between these two relationships. And I just adored the scene between Anne and Anne. I just thought it was so tender and intimate, and I think this scene also cements that Anne really does love Anne Walker and that she feels that she has made the right choice. I think it's one of my favourite scenes of theirs together so far because there was some real connection there. It's just a shame that it had to happen after Anne had been with her side piece. The end of this episode is also really interesting, where we see Anne speaking up as the only woman in a very male-dominated space. And we also see the way that the phrase Gentleman Jack is used against her as a slur for, I believe, the first time in the show. And it's interesting because by the end of this episode, you're both in awe of her confidence and at the same time very aware of the constraints of her sex and sexuality. And it just highlights how much she really stood out in that period. And not just this episode, but the show overall is a great window into the socio-economic history of women, particularly in the 19th century. And where most working class women were in domestic service, middle to upper class women were expected to enter into a heteronormative marriage. Anne Lister did neither. And that's what makes the figure of Anne Lister and this show so fascinating, because it shines a light on a unique part of women's history which subverts the common narrative. It was just another fantastic episode, and I'm really enjoying this season so far. I am enjoying the emotional turbulence of Anne Lister's life, and so many women. Good for her. Okay guys, thanks for watching. If you've seen episode 4, let me know what you thought of it down in the comments section below. Oh, I feel like people have opinions. I know people have some opinions. I know. If you're a lesbian, if you're a woman who likes other women, if you like making love at midnight in the dunes on the Cape, then I'm the love that you've looked for. Join the Sapphic Underground Club and escape. End scene. Don't forget to subscribe for instant disappointment, and I'll see you guys soon. Bye.